Folks, we're straight up on the hour, so we're going to get going. So welcome to this NYMER webinar on loader backhoe safety. I'm Dave Bloodgood. Many of you know me, but a lot of you I know don't because of our territorial divisions, but I'm risk management coordinator for NYMER. And you may know Bruce. We've had Bruce do seminars for us in the past on a number of occasions, and we're happy to have him here today to do loader backhoe. Bruce is retired after 30 years with the New York State DOT, and he sort of started out as a entry-level laborer like a lot of you guys out there, moved on to equipment operator instructor, general foreman, regional training manager, also motor equipment manager. Spent basically his entire adult life working around trucks, heavy equipment operation and maintenance. Lots of experience and knowledge in this equipment. He's going to be sharing that with you today. We've some familiarity with this program that Bruce does, and you're gonna see a lot of things that you may know, but as we all know, it's a great thing to be reminded of a lot of the things that we sort of gloss over on a day-to-day basis because we use this equipment every day. And when nothing happens, you kind of get, perhaps some of us, a little complacent, but it's a good idea to run through all the best practices for safety and usage, maintenance, and to pass that along to the younger guys as they come up, so that they're doing things safely in the right way. So with that, Bruce, you can pop up your presentation and take over from here.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you very much. So let's see if I can get the presentation to come up.
Okay, here we go.
Does that look okay, Dave?
Yes, you do. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this morning. And Dave, thank you for the introduction. This is a little different format than I'm accustomed to. I'm used to being able to walk around the room and chat with you guys and basically feed off from you to do my presentation. I've done this for a long time, these programs, but this is the first webinar I've done. So let's hope it goes well, and we'll get started in. Now, Dave, are they allowed to ask questions as we go?
They are. Yes, they are.
Okay, so we'll take whatever you have as we go. Now, we're going to talk about stuff today, and I'm going to reiterate the fact that I'm not here to try to tell you how to do your job. This is a reminder, a refresher to hopefully bring things back to the front of your mind that you need to be aware of and things you need to be doing. And I'm not here to tell you that you don't know how to do your job and you've got to do it this way. This is here to be a safety refresher reminder. So we'll kind of get started here and we'll roll into it. So that's just normal boilerplate stuff. Obviously, if you have phones and whatnot, if you got to take calls, it's a little easier in this format to step away and do that. I just remembered to silent my phone here on this end. So we're going to talk today about front end loader. And we're going to start out with that. We're going to talk about front end loader, and then we're going to roll into a little bit of backhoe. But with the front end loader, we're going to talk about pre-op.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
We are seeing you as talking, but the screen is minimized. So let's see if we can get that squared away.
Let me see. That did not help.
Okay, I see your screen now. Okay, let me just pull Rick up real quick and see what he sees. Hey, Rick, do you see Bruce's screen okay now?
Yes, that's good right there.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay, Bruce, we're set.
We're okay right there?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Okay, it's showing now, so everything's good.
Okay. So sorry about the glitch, folks. So we're going to talk about pre-op. We're going to talk some about maintenance on the equipment. Trust me, I understand that you're not mechanics. This is just operator maintenance. Basic operation, overhead and underground safety. Talk a little bit about attachments. Okay. We're going to talk also about the backhoe. Now, we're going to go fairly in depth with the front end loader, and the backhoe will skim over the first few things because it's relatively the same, the pre-op, the maintenance. Then we're going to talk about dig safe, basic operation, attachments again. And so you can kind of see where we're headed with this whole thing. It's a general overview. So the question starts out today as, you know, we're all here as operators or supervisors or whatever, but how do you make a good operator? And for those of you that have seen me in person last fall doing snow and ice training, we talk about this. How do you make a good operator? Well, you've got to mentor them. You've got to put them with your best people. If you put your new operators with less than your best people, you're going to end up with less than your best operator. Let's face it, we have to put them with our best people and start them right out from the beginning doing things the way that you want them done and things that are going to be productive for us. You got to have a plan. You got to know what's expected. The people that you're teaching, the people that you're bringing on board, they have to know what's expected. And as long as they know what's expected, I found in my career that 99% of the time, they'll live up to that expectation. You got to communicate. You got to discuss ways of working safely. You can't assume that people are just going to know. It doesn't work that way. And especially for people that are in the supervision roles, you should have seen this by now. You may think that you've communicated to your people on what you expect, but when things go wrong and you look back at it, I know in my 30-year career, a lot of times, most of the time, it was the fact that I didn't communicate it correctly. One of the ways of doing that is in the classroom setting. And if you look really, really, really close on the far left, the guy with his left hand out in the air, none other than Rick Stoll sitting there in one of our classes over the years. So training is an investment. Long and the short of it is you're going to think that you're wasting your time. You're not getting your production done when you're doing some of this training work. Well, let me tell you, it's an investment and it pays off over the long haul. Takes time to make a good operator. You're not going to make a good operator in a day or 2 days or 3 days. It's going to take weeks or months. And in some cases, your best employees are ones that have had the experience and have been around for years. So the overview of the loader itself, front end loaders are go-to piece of equipment for any municipality, used every day for a wide variety of tasks. You guys know that. You know that this piece of equipment is one that you're going to go to day in and day out, and you use it for just a little bit of everything. So just to capture a few things, why do we have a loader? We're going to load trucks, obviously. You know, that's what we do with them. However, we're also going to move materials, relocate stockpiles, things like that. Lift heavy things, whether you're picking up, you know, a DI cover or a precast catch basin or pipes or whatever the case may be. It's there to lift things that we can't lift. You may be grading a site with it. You might sweep with it. Different attachments allow us to do different things. Snow blow, snow removal, all kinds of things that we can do with a loader. Just a couple of examples. There's a clip-on snow pusher. You know, maybe we just got forks and we're just moving materials on site. Stockpiling materials. You know, we're all in that mode where we're going to have to be doing that at municipal levels. Okay. So we're going to roll right into pre and post trip inspections. So I can't emphasize enough that pre and post trip inspections get done. In order for you to be productive with your machine, it's got to run every day. We've got to know what's wrong with it. And we've got to be able to head off any issues that we've got going on, not only so that we can use it daily without fear of it breaking down, but so that we can use it safely. So when you're doing your pre-trip, walk around the equipment to make sure it's safe to pre-op. So you walk around it, just take a peek all the way around it, make sure that there's nothing obviously wrong with it that's going to draw your attention to it. Make sure there's no other people around and the area is safe to work in. Look for obvious damage. Now, in this particular photo, we're pre-opping this piece of equipment right in a nice garage. It's well lit, it's clean, it's dry. For those of you that sometimes leave stuff out on the side of the road overnight, you may not be in this situation. So look for obvious damage, broken windows, big leaks, flat tires, things that need to be addressed right away. If you're out on the side of the road and you find broken windows and things, you may have had some vandalism, and you may need to call the authorities and have them look into that. For those of you that are working in the shop environment, when you walk up to it and you see this stuff, maybe you're not the only operator. So maybe you want to go get the supervisor and say, hey, look, before I ever start, I just want you to know this is what I'm finding with this. And, you know, some of that is kind of to protect yourself. When you're getting in and out of the machine, make sure you use your 3-point climbing. 2 hands and a foot, 2 feet and a hand. Don't go out of the machine forward and jump off the ladder. And trust me, the older I get, the more I appreciate having good handholds and good steps. And the less I appreciate that sudden impact of when I jump onto the ground. Get inside, remove the keys, secure the machine, make sure it's in neutral, parking brakes on, and review the previous inspection report. Inspection reports should be done daily. And this is not only to protect the operator, but as a municipality, and in regards to your insurance and whatnot, if there's issues, you get into an issue with a machine and there's an injury or you have an accident with it, a good lawyer is going to look back and say, well, how did you do your maintenance on it? And your daily inspection report can be good proof that you've done your due diligence on your maintenance. These should be kept on file for 3 months. Need to be signed by the operator. And here's just a generic example of an inspection report. These can be modified any way you seem fit. Now, this particular one doesn't seem to fit for a front end loader. However, you know, any municipality, any entity could take a guideline like this and adapt it to how you see fit to give you a checklist. Trust me, as I get older, the less I remember. I need that checklist to make sure that I actually checked everything. And if you're working in snow and ice conditions, for instance, in the wintertime, and you're just dog tired, you just don't remember. When you walk in, that checklist helps you put your mind back in gear and say, all right, I gotta check this and this and this and this. Or if you get interrupted in the middle of it, phone rings or somebody comes and gets you to do something else, you can go back to that list and say, all right, where'd I leave off? Let me finish this up. Okay, when utilized properly, it gives the operators information about deficiencies, and it also can be used as a lubrication record. This is another variation of that form, another generic version of it. This form was included in your snow and ice packages if you were at one of the classes over the last year or two. There's also battery disconnects on most large loaders. I'm not going to say on every single one, but most of them have them. And when you're purchasing loaders or equipment, battery disconnects are readily available for this equipment. Typically located in the battery compartment, and the battery compartment is typically lockable on these machines now. So if you do leave things out on the side of the road, you can turn the disconnect off, lock the battery compartment and secure the machine. So when you're doing the pre and post trip inspections, you're looking for general conditions, leaks, broken glass, things like that, just things that jump out at you. Remember, on these pre-trips, we're not asking you to spend an hour looking these over. We're asking for 10 or 15-minute walk around and checking all of this other stuff just to make sure it's safe to operate. Look at your tires and wheels. Make sure your tires are inflated. Make sure that your wheels, your lug nuts and whatnot are tight and there's no obvious damage. Hydraulic hoses, you're looking for leaks and potential issues there. Maybe you've got a hose that's rubbed through and the wire's showing. Maybe at that point you might still use it, but you might bring it to the attention of the mechanic. Cutting edges, make sure they're in good condition, wearing evenly. Engine compartments, clean, no obvious leaks, defects, belts are in place, things like that. Fluid levels, fuel, hydraulic, coolant, maybe washer fluid is important to you. Transmission levels, depends on how the machine is set up. Make sure all of this stuff is in good shape. Lights and reflectors, warning labels, make sure everything is there and in proper working order. You always should have an operator's manual available to refer to if you're having questions on where to check fluid levels and things like that. The operator's manuals they need to be available to the operators. Ideally, they'd be kept right in the machine. Trust me, I know that reality dictates that a lot of times that doesn't happen, but they still need to be available somewhere to you. If you're going to work in the articulation point on the loader, make sure that you engage the articulation lock. This red bar that's shown here, this would unpin here, swing up and pin into this hole. If you're going to be in there working in there, you need to lock that. If you're just looking in there and you don't put your head and your body in harm's way in that pinch point, so be it. But if you've got to get in there and work, make sure that's locked. Another view of the pinch point area. And when you look up in here, obviously there's a lot of hydraulics up in here. So look this all over. You're looking for any leaks or issues. 5 seconds of looking in there is going to tell you whether or not you've got leaks and whatnot. So just, take a good look in there. There's also typically grease fittings up in here that you're going to get occasionally. Both ends of the steering cylinder, the articulation pin, top and bottom. When you go to reach up in there and you're going to work up in that area, that's when the articulation lock needs to be in place. This particular loader here, the articulation lock pins down here at the bottom. Two different pictures, two different loaders. Another view of the articulation point, just to reiterate how many hoses and wires and whatnot are located up in this area. It all funnels through there. And here's an example. Here's one of the, the grease fitting areas in the bottom articulation pin. Your drive line may or may not have grease fittings on it. Some of them are sealed. Some of them do have fittings on them. Tires, wheels, and rims. When you're inspecting a tire, wheel, and rim, I tend to use the spiral method. I mean, the tire looks inflated. That's all well and fine. But if you look at it for damage and inspection, if you start on the outside and it looks okay, no obvious cuts, things sticking out of it, whatnot, then look at the sidewall. Then look at the rim. Then look at the lugs or the mounting bolts, make sure they're all tight. And that brings you down to the center. And you do the same thing on the inside. Look at the tread area and then the sidewall and then the rim. Tire inflation is extremely important on a loader. We're going to hit on that again moving forward. But very, very typical to find things either underinflated or loose lug nuts, etc. on these machines. Cutting edge wear, make sure your cutting edge is in good shape. Make sure your bolts are in place and tight and your edge is wearing evenly. Like we talked about with tire inflation, if you've got a soft tire, it's going to wear hard on that corner of that edge. So as long as the edge is even, typically your tire pressure is even side to side. Now, over the years, I've walked into shops and one end of the edge is wore hard and the other end's good. And I look at the operator, when's the last time you checked your tire pressure? Oh, I check it all the time. Well, let's go get the gauge out and let's see what it is. The end that's wore hard, typically the tire is soft. And it's just an obvious telltale sign. So make sure you keep your edges in good shape. You never want that edge to wear back into the bucket. That's going to create a large dollar value repair. Let's put it that way. If you have to get into that and weld in a new backer edge in there, that's big money. So check for blade wear, bolts are tight, and remember that indicates tire pressure if your wear is even or not. Engine compartments, every machine is a little different. You just kind of, as an operator, you're looking to make sure that your belts are in place and tight, that your radiators are clean, that there's no obvious leaks anywhere on the machine, and you're going to look at it from both sides. You know, it gives you another view of it. In your exhaust area, you know, here's your turbo. If you see soot and whatnot coming out of the exhaust, maybe you've got exhaust leaks. Here's your injector pump. Maybe you've got fuel leaking. You're just looking for obvious things. Make sure your radiators are clean. Then you've got to check fluid levels. Remember, newer vehicles run DEF fluid, diesel exhaust fluid. Don't get that confused with diesel fuel. So make sure that you're putting the right liquid in the right place. So DEF fluid, we got to check fuel, check hydraulic, check transmission, coolant levels, washer fluid. Just make sure you're checking all these levels. Battery compartment. Over the years, I can't tell you how many times when I'm teaching a class, I always would make sure that we opened up the battery compartment. And over the years, I can't tell you how many times I'd find issues in here, either cables rotted off or ready to come off, or battery hold downs. These hold down bolts broke and the battery's flopping around in there. Get these areas opened up, wash them out with a garden hose or whatever. You can see this one's got salt and whatnot down in it. Keep them clean and keep an eye on them and make sure everything stays tight, secure, and clean in there. Your air filter pre-breather, your dust collector up here on the top. If you're working in a dusty environment, I have seen operations that are so dusty, you're cutting shoulders, you're doing things like that, where this pre-cleaner element here would fill up and you'd have to empty it every day. Normal operations, that could go for a long, long time. All it is glancing up and taking a look at it if your machine's equipped with it. And you'll be able to see the dust buildup in this glass area. I understand not every place has a mechanic, but every place really needs to have a PM sheet. And at some point in time, somebody needs to go through that PM sheet and check this machine over. If you are the mechanics in a small municipality, it really pays huge dividends to make up a PM check sheet that's unique to your piece of equipment. And it gives you a place to write notes, and maybe there's little specific things that machine requires each time you service it. Now, in my case, over the years, in one of my extracurricular activities, I took care of recycling equipment, dump trucks and balers and forklifts and all that stuff. For every one of those pieces of equipment, I made up a unique sheet. They were similar, but unique to the equipment. And I'd have my filter numbers, I'd have all my stuff on it. And then I kept a 3-ring binder. And in that 3-ring binder, they were right in order. So I could look back and say, well, last week or last month, this is what I did to that. And going forward, it gave you an ongoing record of what you did, and it was a one-stop shop for that piece of equipment. And it really made good continuity through the program to keep your machine in good shape. And then if there was ever a question, you could look back and you had the information right there. It's a very simple process. It doesn't need to be complicated. So do you keep any records? Well, that's what we're talking about. You really should keep these records. You know, and I'm gonna step backwards for just a second, because we're gonna, well, and I apologize for that. I'm going backwards in the wrong way. When it talks about keeping records, remember, when you go back and you have that accident, you have that injury case in your facility. God hope it never happens to you. But those records can really help you. If you do good record keeping, you can say, no, the machine was not at fault. Here's what we've been doing to the machine right along. We've been doing our due diligence to keep that machine safe and usable for our employees. So washing and greasing. Can't reiterate this enough. Washing and greasing is the single biggest thing that an operator can do. It's cheap. The stuff typically is right there for you to use, and it helps the mechanic immensely. Okay, a lot of places your grease gun, you know, if I walk in, it would look like this. I got to tell you, I hate grease. You know, I worked on one of my hay balers last night, and when I come in from the shop, I have to go right out and I get the Dawn dish detergent out and start scrubbing with a scrub brush because I got grease all over me. But that's what saves your equipment. And grease, the old saying is, grease is cheap. Remember, when you're greasing things, a lot of times in the municipal setting, you can have a couple of people working on things. One of the things that I did years ago working for the state was we made up these flexible grease hoses. They were 6 foot long. That way, one person could run the gun and the other person could run the hose. And it made it a lot handier for greasing our equipment. I understand you don't always have that ability to have 2 people, but the other thing that's out there now is electric grease guns. And I myself own one at home and I love it. It helps me do things alone. In addition to that, lock-on tips. I've started using a lock-on tip. Most of the time it's beneficial for me. And I also have a variety of other tips that I use set up on other guns. So the easier we can make it to use and the more user-friendly, the more apt we are to use it. Lube charts should be available on each and every machine, especially your newer equipment. They're all going to come with this chart on them someplace. And if there's not a chart on it, it's available in the operator's manual. This will tell you the location and the frequency that needs to be lubricated. And typically it'll tell you what the lubrication is, you know, whether it's an oil or a grease or whatever it is. If you're going to work under a raised boom, this red bar is a boom lock and it goes on the boom cylinder. It'll just go on one side of the machine and just keeps that for that boom from coming down on you in case of a hydraulic failure. Never work under a raised boom, never walk under a raised boom without that in place. Okay. So we're going to talk about operator's responsibility a little bit. You need to know the capacity and the limits of your equipment. Plain and simple. You need to know what it's capable of doing and what its limitations are. Once again, you're going to glean that through the operator's manual or through some of your training. Don't modify any part of the machine. The machines are designed to do the job from the factory. There's been a lot of thought put into it, and I know, and I'm guilty of it. Sometimes we think, well, if I was to change this, then I could do that. Well, remember, you're taking a huge responsibility on to do that. And it's really in your best interest to use it as it was intended. Never allow riders. None of these machines typically have buddy seats in them. You're never to allow a rider in a bucket or on an attachment. So your responsibility to make sure the people around you are safe. Keep others away from the machine. Once again, your responsibility to keep people back. And if people aren't moving away, just stop. Stop till they get out of the way, and then you can continue on with your operation. Operator's compartment. I got to tell you, over you know, over my 30-year career with the DOT, what a change in operator compartments. And nowadays with pilot control joysticks, you know, that we see here, climate control cabs, you know, either air ride or spring ride seats. I mean, things are just tremendously better than they were 30 years ago. So you've got to take the time to understand what's available to you in this compartment. And there's so many bells and whistles on these machines now that it takes a little bit of time to understand what they do, but take time to become familiar with them. Don't be afraid to sit in that seat with the operator's manual and review what all of the switches and the controls do. It's important to have that under your belt before you go out and operate around other people. Another example, another closer look at, you know, at some of the bells and whistles, you know, that are on these machines. Quick disconnect buckets, self-leveling buckets, return to dig functions, all of these things that you need to be familiar with. Some of the big stuff, warning alerts that could come up on the dash in your machine. Typically all the newer machines have some sort of digital dash in them now. I'm not saying that your 30-year-old machine, you know, that you use in the stockpile down in the quarry that you only use once in a while has this, but typically this is what's out there now. And there's 3 levels of warnings that'll come up on the dash typically. So you have a danger, a warning, and a caution. Okay. Caution, warning, and danger. So let's go back. I'm going to back up. The caution symbol indicates a hazard which could result in injury or damage to the equipment or property if proper precautions are not taken. It's giving you a heads up. Hey, you need to look at this. The warning symbol indicates a hazard which could result in death or serious injury if proper precautions are not taken. It's kind of the next level. You really, you know, this is your second chance. You really need to take a look at this. And then the danger symbol indicates an extreme hazard which could result in a high probability of death or serious injury if proper precautions are not taken. That's kind of your last and final warning. And you need to stop right then and get it taken care of. So typically it'll come up as caution, warning, and then danger. If any of those come up, make sure you take a look at them. And if you don't know what's causing it, ask somebody that does. Get it looked into before it becomes a serious situation. You don't only want to keep it safe for you, but you don't want to do a lot of damage to your machine. Here towards the end of my career, with all of this DEF and all the emissions stuff that we were getting into, loaders typically in a lot of places for us would idle a lot. Well, idling is horrible on these machines with emissions on them. And a typical repair to those machines, you know, if you let it go to the danger point and the exhaust plugs up, and we have to send it into the dealer because nobody has the diagnostic equipment to handle it in the field because it's all proprietary. Those are $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 repairs that could have been prevented had you heeded the warnings leading up to them. So just an example of what can go on out there in regards to the equipment. Other danger warnings, you know, keep clear of this area when the engine's running. It's one of the pinch point areas. Remember the guy that's not supposed to be riding in the bucket? Remember, that's the operator's responsibility that nobody's in the bucket. So he's doubly in danger here. There's 2 guys in that bucket. Make sure you carry your bucket low when traveling. Now that's for visibility control, whatever. But remember, the higher your bucket is, the higher the center of gravity. And when you have a high center of gravity, things like this can happen. Trust me, that's no way to be checking your seatbelt. You know, you want to make sure that you're stable and you have good visibility and you're going to be able to operate safely. Loading trucks, always load from the driver's side, not the passenger side. 99% of the time that can happen. I know there'll be a 1% out there where you have to do something different, but you need to make sure that you can maintain sight of that operator. If you lose sight of the operator, you need to make sure that you find that operator before you move on. And another big courtesy is when you're loading trucks time after time, if you're hauling materials, take a quick peek and make sure the guy's tailgate's latched. It's going to make a lot of work for everybody if that tailgate pops open. And trust me, I've been on that end. You know, I've spread number 2 stone the whole length of the quarry before, and trust me, that quarry is not happy having to go clean all that up. And I'm pretty darned embarrassed over the whole deal. You know, if the loader operator would have just made sure that my latch was up, you know, it sure would have helped. You've got your lifting hook on top of the bucket. That's a typical on most buckets. Make sure if you're going to use that lifting hook, you know what it's capable of, and you don't exceed that weight limit. ACS couplers are pretty common. These are quick couplers for attachments and whatnot. Doesn't mean that ACS is the only coupler out there. There's lots of different versions of them. One of the things that we did find is we started adding a rubber mud flap on the top of our buckets, our material buckets, and that mud flap attached to the bucket, but it would actually come down and cover this whole area, and it covered up the hose connections and whatnot, and it didn't hinder hooking up to the bucket at all. You'd simply tuck under it with this saddle, and you lock the bucket on from in the cab anyway. But it protected the salt and the material buildup on top of this whole area, and it really saved us a lot of aggravation. It kept that area nice and clean. So just one of the thoughts that's out there. Fork attachments, very common. Much safer to have this style of attachment than the forks that clamp to the bucket. You've got much better visibility, much more capacity. Just another option that's out there. When we talk about loading and hauling the equipment, you know, in regards to the loader, loading and hauling is a class all of its own. But you as an operator might get asked to put a piece of equipment on a trailer, whether it's on a detachable, whether it's on a tag along, whatever the case may be. Remember that you really need to make sure that the machine is on there and is secured well, but you got to know where the proper tie down points are. So make sure you identify those. You got to know what the machine's height and weight is. You need to cover the exhaust to prevent turbo damage. Turbos will free spool from the vacuum created from the air going across the top of the stack. A free spooling turbo with no lubrication to it over a period of time can do damage. Here's an example of a machine. There's the weight, the height, the width. It's labeled right on the cab door. So now the operator of the loader, but the operator of the trailer can look at it also and say, all right, I know what that weighs. I know what I need to do for securing it. And it just takes the guesswork out of it. When you're trailering your equipment also, if the slow moving vehicle is facing the back of the trailer, then it also should be covered. And we used to have rubber covers that just slid over those. They were made out of mud flaps, and they would just clip onto the top of this and cover up the cymbal. So you put a cover on it. We used an old rubber boot to slide down over the exhaust stack, and that worked pretty well. Before I get to that, let me back up just a second here. And remember, on your machine, basic rule of thumb is 4 chains on the machine itself, 4 chains, 4 binders, and then an extra chain for the attachment. So in this case, the bucket. If you're using a backhoe, trailer and a backhoe, that would get a chain on the front bucket and 1 on the rear boom, plus 4 on the machine itself. General rule of thumb. There's, like I say, it's a whole nother class to talk about load securement and trailering. And there's a lot of calculations that go into the weight of the equipment and the working load limit on your chains and binders and chain and binder identification. There's just all kinds of stuff that goes on. But just a general rule of thumb, 4 chains, 4 binders on a piece of equipment plus 1 chain and binder for each of the attachments. So we'll get caught back up to where we were. Dig safe. I can't say enough about dig safe. You really, anytime you're going to dig in the ground for any reason, you need to call dig safe ahead of time. It's a free call. They'll come mark it out. They'll show you where the stuff is. In addition to that, always use your good judgment. Every once in a while, as well intended as everybody is along this chain, if there's something obvious that tells you that, hey, there's a power line that's got to be feeding this particular building, and I don't see how it's marked out, continue to ask questions. 30 some years ago, I was working for a private contractor, and we were working in a state fish hatchery, and it was all marked out. And the excavator operator stopped, and he goes, I'm telling you, there's power going to this building over here, and I don't see how it's getting there. And he wouldn't dig anymore until somebody figured that part out. Well, they finally went and got an old fella that worked in the plant, and he came out and he goes, oh yeah, he goes, you're just about ready to dig into the primary line that runs into that building. It wasn't on anybody's drawings or anything, but that gentleman's common sense saved a big accident that day. Once he knew about where it was, then he gently dug around, and then we hand dug around the line and found it, and we were able to continue on. Yes, we need to call dig safe 100%. Also use some good common sense. We're going to talk more about dig safe moving forward when we get into the backhoe stuff. So we're going to talk about the backhoe overview. And the backhoe, again, you know, that's very similar to the front end loader. It's just that it's a front end loader with an extra piece of attachment on it. That's all it is, really. Okay, lots of things we can do with this machine. And here's just a quick example from JCB on some of the attachments that they have available, from forks to a sweeper to grapple buckets to 4-in-1 buckets, augers, hammers, all kinds of stuff available. So why do we have a backhoe? Pretty similar in the first couple. For the loader, we're going to load trucks, move materials and stockpiles, lift heavy things. But then we can dig and trench with it. That's the difference. We can still backfill and grade. We can still do snow removal. But the dig and trench is the big thing. So we're going to talk about mainly about the trenching aspect of it. The pre-op, the post-op, the maintenance, all of that stuff, everything we talked about with the front end loader still applies to this piece of equipment. The big thing with the backhoe is the operation of it and the trenching capabilities of it. Once again, you need to know your equipment. No excuse for not knowing your equipment. Read the manuals, understand it, and just know what you're up against. You've got the operator's manual to work with. Knowing the machine's limitations are huge. I had a gentleman one time tell me, he goes, your machine just isn't good enough. It can't do, you know, we can't make it do everything we want it to do. Well, there's two ways of looking at that. The machine is probably plenty good enough. You're just asking it to do something it's not designed to do. And therefore, you may need another machine. You need to know the machine's limitations and stay within them. Be aware of your surroundings. Once again, you're responsible for anybody within your reach. So pay attention to what's going on around you. Do we need to call dig safe? If you're going to dig into the dirt anywhere, anytime, yes, you need to call dig safe. Whether you're putting a signpost in the ground or you're digging a hole for a bollard at your building, you need to call dig safe. You guys are more familiar with it than I am. DigSafe has a process. You typically, all the municipalities are going to have accounts set up with them, and they're going to get back to you within a relatively short period of time. You know, and I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't recall the days limitations, but it's within like 2 to 5 days, everything will be taken care of. So you got to plan ahead a little bit. There are situations for emergency stuff. If you've got a water main break or something, you can get emergency markouts also. So you need to know what the scope of the job is. Do we need to call DigSafe? Yeah, if we're going to be digging, we need to call DigSafe. How deep are we going? You know, well, where does that play into the whole gamut of things? Well, it plays in a big part of it, and we're going to be talking about that. What's the trench safety concerns? That might relate back to how deep we're going. What's the soil that we're digging in? You know, does somebody need to get down in that ditch? Let's think about all of this stuff. We don't want to be this guy. We don't want to be this poor guy that is, you know, he's out there doing his job and hits a gas line. Not a good thing at all. Not a good thing at all. When we're talking about trench safety and people having to get into a trench, we're going to either have to potentially slope the trench, bench the trench, or shore the trench. And a lot of stuff that you guys are going to be doing, whether you're in water lines or things like that, you're going to be deep enough in the ground. You're going to need to provide some sort of this protection. DigSafe sent me a couple of slides. Stairway, ladder, ramp, or other safe means of egress shall be located in trench excavations that are 4 feet or more in depth, so as to require more than 25 feet of lateral travel for employees. You'd never have to go more than 25 feet in a trench 4 feet or more deep to get to a ladder to get out. You've got to be able to get out. So keep that in mind. Something to have in the back of your mind. There's different ways of doing this. Remember, if we're 4 feet or deep or more, we've got to either bench or slope the excavation site or put in a trench box. These are some examples. There's a trench box. So we either have to slope, shore, or shield. So if you're going to be in there and the trench is 4 feet or more deep, just to reiterate this, you've got to give some sort of protection. And you can see in this picture, there's a ladder in there also. So this is a perfect example of a way to be doing this. I don't know how many municipalities have trench boxes, but it's something to think about if you're doing a lot of this work. You never want to work over top of a person in a trench. Remember, you as the operator are responsible for all the people within your reach. Okay. This slide kind of speaks for itself. You know, there's just certain things that we shouldn't do. And trust me, when it comes to being a redneck and doing things I shouldn't do, I've done an awful lot of them. Don't put yourself in this position. Okay? This is not where we want to be. There's other machines available to do bridge inspection work or repair work, and the backhoe is not one of them. Another example, now, especially for me, because I don't like heights, but just because your bucket truck's broke down doesn't mean that this is the acceptable way to go up and fix the lights in the yard. And I know it's hot, and I know I want to get in the shade at lunchtime, but I also know what the hydraulics are like on our equipment. And I don't think that there's any boom lock or articulation lock that's going to prevent a catastrophic result here. Trench safety again. You know, here's an example of the guys working in the trench. I don't see any sloping. I don't see any trench box. And unless those guys are really, really, really tiny, they're definitely more than 4 feet in the ground. Closer up look. You know, and I realize that trench boxes are difficult when you've got lines that are running perpendicular to where you're working. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, but you've got to protect the workers. You've got to protect the people. We can replace the lines, we can replace the equipment, we cannot replace the people. So give that some long, hard thoughts there. When I first started working for a private excavating contractor and I didn't know any better, we used to put in wells, dug wells. And I can remember being down in the bottom of a hole that's about 6 foot across, 25 feet in the ground. And he'd let me down in with a bucket to get the first tile or two set. And, you know, working right over my head, setting me in and out with the bucket on the excavator. And looking back at that, that was one of the stupidest things I ever could have done. If that had ever caved in, there was no getting me back. And I'd have probably laid in there and stunk and contaminated the well besides. Just not what we need to be doing. You don't want to become a statistic. Each and every one of you deserves to go home at the end of the day with all your fingers, all your toes, and you need to know you're going to go home safe. You know, your families are there depending on you. So the way to do that is to follow the rules, to take the safety precautions, and to watch out for each other. So that's the conclusion of my program. We went through it just a little quicker today, Dave, than we did in practice. Same exact program, but now we can set and take some questions if anybody's got any.
By all means, I just sent a reminder out that folks can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A, and we're happy to answer them. I'm just going to take a moment to just remind everybody, and I know you all know this, you guys are out there working hard. I mean, what you do is hard work. And now, you know, the other thing is that you operate a lot of different kinds of equipment, and you do it more as generalists rather than super specialists. Like, you know, somebody that's with a tree company operates a chainsaw all the time. You guys would operate a chainsaw part of the time. Same safety applies to each, and there are certainly more opportunities for those that don't use things, or rather that use things all the time, to become hurt. But because they're quite familiar with all the safety practices. Now, it's a dangerous job you guys do for that reason. Even a guy like me, I happen to have had 2 acquaintances killed on jobs that over time, one was they were moving a hydraulic hammer and they had not inspected the chain hookups. It dropped on them and crushed them and killed them. In another case, a guy I worked with at high school, or rather went to high school with, he was down on a metal culvert, and the backhoe that was operating adjacent to him struck a power line, which transmitted the juice right down to him, and he was electrocuted, and he didn't make it through it. So, you know, all of these various facets that Bruce went through today, you know, the maintenance, you know, breakdowns can occur and such, and some of them can lead to dangerous situations. But the operation of the equipment, you know, these are big pieces of equipment, powerful pieces of equipment, and your situational awareness is critical for those around you and your own safety. So that's just a quick word on that. So if anybody has any questions for Bruce, now's the time. You can just click on the Q&A. Otherwise, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little tab that says polls. We have a quick 4-question poll there that relates to this. We're always interested in the feedback that we get from our attendees, and especially when we're using a new way of doing things like this, video conferencing, as opposed to sitting right in the room, which we're all used to. We're always looking for ways to improve it and make the experience better and more productive for you. So please take a moment to fill out those poll questions. And the recording of today's presentation is going to be housed on our online university. So for those supervisors and foremen that are here without your guys, you can always access this and walk your guys through it with yourself as the